Welcome back to another episode of the Ben James Show. I'm just here in my house in Bali, and I figured I'd do a podcast because I'm a digital nomad and I like the sound of my own voice, and I think I've got good opinions about things. That should be my my intro. So I'm gonna make this my intro. This is the Ben James Show. My name's Ben James, and I'm a digital nomad, and I live in Bali, and I like the sound of my own voice, and I have opinions on things. Welcome. Because I fucking always suck at like intros, so that may as well be it. It's probably better than any of the other shit that I say. What do I normally say? Welcome to the Ben James Show. I am Ben James. See, I can't even fucking remember my name. Ben James, Ben Kelly, Ben James Kelly. Anywho, so let's get to it. Another short form podcast. I hit up my Instagram stories and I asked the single ladies if they have any questions for myself around men in dating. Now, I was single for 6-7 years before I met Paola and in the relationship that I am now. Really good at it. Really good at being single. Loved it. Obviously have a lot of experience. 7 years is a good chunk of time. Traveled the world, dated a number of different people. Amazing people. I had incredible dating experiences, but I also learned a lot about myself in that process. Some of my patterns, why I did the things that I did, and brought some light to some of the unconscious behaviors that maybe I didn't necessarily realize before. And I had one come through from the amazing Anastasia, however you'd like to, however your name is pronounced, Anastasia. And the question was, why do guys date someone when their mental health is bad and then blame you for the split? Now this kind of, I guess, filters back into a little bit of the podcast I did a little while ago with attachment styles. Okay, now this is obviously still super relevant to women and men. There's women that are going to do the same things that I'm going to mention in the podcast. And I've got some notes here. Just some quick notes that I jotted down. And a lot of them do filter back into attachment styles and obviously things that maybe happened in the past, right? Now, you mentioned a little bit about, that have got, their mindset or the health of their mind is maybe not the best at the time. Maybe they're just, their mental health isn't necessarily the best. They've got a lot of stuff going on, right? And again, with a lot of the things that we do as humans, especially when it has to do with something like this, I think for me, obviously, a lot of time people really want distractions. People really want to medicate. Going deep and sitting with difficult emotions is very challenging. It's very challenging. We're always seeking a way of being able to avoid sitting with our difficult emotions, right? Through, medicating through substances or experiences or people, through, binge eating, lack of eating, drug addiction, alcohol, sex addiction, gambling, all these different types of things. Phone addiction, right? Checking constantly the phone. Sitting with the difficult emotions that we have in a difficult thought process, it's really, really challenging, and it's superhuman to want to try and fill the space that would be taken up by having to sit with ourselves. Now, lots of forms of addiction or codependencies are built from an inability to be with oneself and an inability to be with one's own thoughts. And when you've got a really ruminating, self-debilitating thought pattern that's on a circular, like I said, ruminating contingency, it's really easy to just be like, I'm going to avoid this, I'm going to place people in the scene, I'm going to distract myself, all those sorts of things, when really what they need is to be able to sit within it, find people around them to be able to sit within it, but also not be a distraction, right? So I only want to speak a little bit to that, but the big part that I kind of want to focus on is the blaming you for the split. Now, again, with dismissive avoidant people, or people that have somewhat of a dismissive avoidant attachment style, or even especially like a fearful avoidant attachment style, is perhaps that they've had a parent in the past that has maybe, or people, even just people in the past, another relationship perhaps, that they've had someone in the relationship avoid, abandon them or reject them. And just the same within bullying. If you're being bullied at home, your parents are bullying, your siblings are bullying, it's better to then be the bully than to be the victim when you go back out into school, right? I don't want to be the victim. I'm the victim at home. I'm going to be the bully at school, because if I'm the bully, that means I'm not the victim, right? And the same can sort of be in a sense for abandonment or rejection. It's much easier when we have the fear of abandonment and rejection to be able to be the one that isn't at fault and avoid the self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, not even avoiding it, but creating the end of the relationship that we ultimately fear, but on our terms. So people with dismissive avoidances are always looking for ways to be able to hang the relationship, right? Through little petty things. And typically the reasons that they give for the reason as to why they're ending relationship, or they're blaming you for the relationship, is rarely ever the reason. It's the same in sales. When people give you an excuse as to why they don't want to buy your thing, it's rarely the reason. The reason is really underlying. They give a really surface level reason, and hopefully you just take it on board, right? So with people that want to hang the relationship and find little bits of things to make your problem, it allows them to avoid layering more shame as to why they're the problem. It allows them to escape from the reoccurring of a sense of abandonment or rejection, right? And especially if someone's got a parent that they carry shame around, that maybe did bad things within their relationship. Let's say I'm a man and I have a father, and my father cheated, and my father did this and did that and whatever, and you identify as him as being not a good, you have shame around the way that they behaved, and in turn you've gone, well, I don't want to be like that. You're starting denying these aspects of yourself. You know, you're wanting to correct it, and you're not wanting to be what that parent represented to you, which was the villain in this scenario, right? So people don't want to have shamed a parent for what they've done. They don't want to identify as that within themselves. So they'll go to work to go and find something that's wrong with the other partners to alleviate them from potentially being the villain in this case. That is a possibility. Again, there are so many variables. There's so many life experiences. There's so many reasons as to why these things play out. That can obviously be one of them. The real main thing I kind of see within that is obviously the attachment style, maybe the fear of abandonment and rejection, and wanting to hang the relationship to avoid fulfilling the villain archetype or whatever they've created in their head that they really don't want to become, that they fear becoming through a parent that they've ultimately shamed through whatever behaviors that they've had, right? It can also be, and what leads to this is an inability to go deep, an inability to communicate, an inability to take ownership. And as we're seeing in these days, everyone really wants to try and put the onus on everyone else and blame everyone else. So it's like we see it with a lot of social commentary and social issues that people are talking about. No one wants to take responsibility for their emotions. No one wants to take ownership. And ultimately taking ownership and responsibility means ultimate power. And a lot of people just don't want that. And we see that manifest in a lot of different ways, right? To take responsibility for what's coming up for you and being able to verbalize it and communicate it without feeling guilt and without feeling shame is a really difficult thing for a lot of people to do. But when you've integrated a lot of this stuff, you've become secure, you're able to verbalize and share your fears, share your insecurities, share things that happened in your past and work through them. And surely enough, the people that you're with, if they're secure enough, are going to be able to respect you and love you and feel even more intimate with you for the fact that they've been able to communicate those things, right? So again, a lot of the times when relationships fall, or honesty is lacking, or truth hasn't been spoken, it can boil down to two things. Either I don't think you're going to like the real me if I speak the truth, or I'm honest. Because again, the truth, subjective. Everyone says, I'm speaking my truth. Like, their truth, whatever. Like, they're speaking whatever's honest, or they fear, or they don't think you're strong enough to hear what they have to say. So they're the two reasons but people aren't honest. And if they do not want to entertain those two things, they'll either deviate around it, minimize it, create different sorts of reasons as to that seem easier for you to hear to be able to navigate out, right? So, and also one thing that I've kind of noticed I want to talk to as far as reasons as to that are contributing to people hanging relationships and nitpicking and going to find things that are wrong with their partners to allow them to feel like they've got a good enough reason to end the relationship, that ultimately avoids running the risk of them being abandoned or being at fault or being a villain or being rejected. And a lot of it is we've seen the effects of beauty standards on women, but what about the effects of beauty standards on men and their expectations of women? Now, one of the best things that, and this boils back down to like lust and infatuation, right? Lust and infatuation is like built from very little knowledge, very little data. You know very little about the person. You have this ideology, you have this representation of what you want in a partner. And because you get a little bit of info online, especially online, you get a little bit of information online, you start to create and fill in the pieces with what you want that person to be. And you create this fake, false, very limited creation of a viewpoint of a person, create a halo effect that's been built from very little information whatsoever. And that creates lust and that creates infatuation. And we've seen that with sort of like the body types of women, is that guys are seeing these smooth butts, these, not having no cellulite, no blemishes, all these sorts of things, right? And they're then looking at maybe their partner and being like, well, you're not like so-and-so who's online, who looks like this, their butt looks like this, their skin looks like this, right? And guys, I think this is kind of a place where it can be damaging to guys in their perspective of unfair expectations of women and women's bodies and how that affects their relationship, and if they're using that as a way to falsely downplay their relationship and create these false expectations on women that allow them to use as a reason again to go and navigate our relationship, make it their fault, make it their flaw. That's the reason, right? Now, one of the best things that ever happened to me, and again, it comes from living in a place like Bali. There was times when I was single, especially, I used to lust over women I saw online all the time. I used to be infatuated with some women, and you start to piece it. It's like, off of very little information, you'd be like, oh man, I want to be with that person. Off of what? Off of what? You don't know what they're like. You don't know what their personality is like. You don't know what their wound is. You don't know what trauma is. You don't know what bullshit they've got going on. You don't know. You know very little, but then we create this ideology around them, and they're like, oh, the sun shines out their ass. And the best thing is like, I have lived in places like Los Angeles and Bali, where I've been able to meet people that have this strong online presence, good on social media, good social media skills, probably not the best social skills, and I've met them, and it's all washed away. Like everything's just sort of washed away. The lust and infatuation, it's like it goes away, and the expectations start to really shift. You stop lusting over people that much. You stop being infatuated and realizing you have very little information, right? And that's like a big part of what beauty standards can do and affect guys. And I'm just lucky at the fact that I've been able to meet so many people that I once maybe infatuated or put on a pedestal or did all these things, and met them in real life and either dated them or met them. And after so many times of being so wrong and having my expectations let down with people that I used to be infatuated, that I built this ideology around online, did it just drift away? And did I stop being infatuated with people and building this false viewpoint of other people that all I've gathered from is what they present online? Did the reoccurrence of that exposure drifted away, where I'm like, yeah, they're this online, but there was always like a big but that kind of then washed it away. And when you've had enough exposure to that, you become grounded and you're like, oh yeah, that person's really attractive, and you stop filling in the space of all the things that are left out online that can only be exposed, that can only be received through in-personal relationships, actually meeting people, actually being with them. So for me, I think a big part of women's beauty standards these days is not only affecting women, but it's creating a false expectation on women for men in heterosexual relationships. And again, for people who are dismissive avoidant, they don't need much to want to try and hang in a relationship and try and be able to get themselves out of it, especially in the points where it's requiring them to go deeper, to be able to go more intimate, to go past that honeymoon phase where it's more challenging to become more intimate. Maybe they've been people that have been able to have fleeting relationships that have been full of passion, full of intimacy, full of vulnerability, in the beginning stages, but just haven't been able to go deeper beyond where that like first initial high energy, high passion sort of phase is an easy place to be able to function within, right? So there's some of the things I've seen, maybe answering your question, Anastasia. Sorry if I'm pronouncing either of those wrong. And also just a little bit on what I think are what filters into men's minds, especially if they're a dismissive avoidant or sort of looking to hang in a relationship, and the effects of social media and women's body standards and beauty standards that are filtering into men's perception and false perception of reality when it comes to women. So guys, tune into my Instagram. I'm always asking questions like this. I'm always looking for inspiration to create content and to be able to talk. As I said, love the sound of my voice. No, just kidding. Yeah, my voice isn't actually too good for radio, but anyway, join me over on Instagram, _Ben James _. I'm always in Insta stories kind of talking about different social constructs and social issues that are going on. Love talking to you in there. So guys, join me over on there. Leave a review if you've enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time. Cheers.